I remember walking into the operating room and just thinking, wow, it's bright in here. Wow, there's so many people in here. I'm really overwhelmed right now. Hello, it's Delilah. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be all about C-sections, what to expect before, during, and after a C-section. I'm going to go through as many details as I can remember. 3 months ago, I had a C-section myself, and it was not what I expected it to be. I mean, I don't really know what I expected it to be, but it kind of caught me. It did. It caught me off guard. I feel like there's so much talk about vaginal birth and what goes on during a vaginal birth and what to expect for that, but no one really talks about C-sections and what to expect during those. And so if you are someone like me who was completely unprepared and had no idea what to expect, this video is for you. Or if you're just genuinely curious about what happens during a C-section. Everything that I'm going to be talking about today is based off of my own personal experience. My C-section was a planned C-section, but planned in the sense that I went in for a doctor appointment and I was told, you need to come in tonight. You're spending the night at the hospital and tomorrow morning we're doing a C-section. So I didn't have time to research or prepare or understand, or I was really thrown into it. And I would have liked to have known more what to expect. Also, I live in Saskatchewan, Canada, so my experience in my hospital might be completely different from your country. So with that being said, let me know in the comments below if you had a C-section. How did it go? What was it like? What was your experience? What was something that you did not expect to happen? I'm really curious and I would love to know more, and I know people watching would also benefit from your stories as well. So leave those in the comments and I'm just gonna hop right in. So before C-section, what happens? I will admit that this is all really blurry in my mind because it was just such a crazy whirlwind of a time and there was a lot happening and it was hard to process all of it. So if you have a scheduled C-section, first of all, you'll get a call from the hospital letting you know the date and time of your C-section. They'll schedule it for you. And then they'll also set up a phone call meeting with a nurse to kind of just really help you understand what to expect, what's going to happen, and walk you through the process. My case was a little bit unique because I had the phone call, told me the date and time, and then the next day when I went into my appointment, they said, actually your baby's coming tomorrow. So I was supposed to get a phone call from the nurse, but I never got that. It's not like I went in blind. The nurses were really, really good about answering our questions and really walking us through, but I didn't have a lot of time to mentally prepare. Anyway, you'll have a phone call appointment with a nurse. They'll tell you what to expect. They gave me a paper that kind of went through, you know, what to expect, where to go, what medications to take. There's some stuff you have to do in preparation the night before. Things like you cannot eat large quantities of food after midnight. This is to prevent vomiting and nausea and choking during the surgery. I could have a light snack 6 hours before, but after that, nothing. Like not even gum, nothing. Clear fluids were permitted until 2 hours before surgery. So that's things like pulp-free juice, coffee or tea without cream or water. Those were acceptable in smaller quantities until 2 hours before surgery, and then after that, again, nothing. And obviously if you're having an emergency C-section, this is not part of the process at all because that happens right away. They'll give you an antacid that you need to take the night before and again in the morning before the surgery. And you have to wash yourself the night before with an antibacterial soap, and then you aren't allowed to put any lotions or anything on top. And then once you get there in the morning, again, you have to take another shower with antibacterial soap and just really scrub, especially that area. So then an hour before the surgery, they'll come in and they'll start kind of prepping you, getting you ready. They put an IV in my arm, and right away they gave me a dose of antibiotics through the IV. Then you need to take an antacid drink called sodium citrate. Then you need to take an antacid drink called sodium citrate. This stuff does not taste good. It tasted like salty lemon water. It was pretty gross. Then they'll give you an oral naproxen. This is the same stuff that they give you after birth, whether it's C-section or vaginal. You can take that with a sip of water, and then after that you just wait. This is the most excruciating wait of your life. Eventually they'll come in, they'll say, okay, we're ready for you. We're gonna take you down to the OR. Zach got in his scrubs, we put on our hair nets, we had the, what are they called, like the feet coverings on our feet. and we walked down to the OR. At that point, the nurse said, take off your mask, give each other a good kiss, and then we're gonna take your husband to the other room. So they took Zach to the recovery room, and he sat there alone as he waited for me to be prepped for surgery. And so this is where things got really crazy. So what to expect during the C-section. I remember walking into the operating room and just thinking, wow, it's bright in here. Wow, there's so many people in here. I'm really overwhelmed right now. I don't know if there's normally a lot of people in the operating room. I don't know if my case was a special exception. I know reading in the papers, it said that there should just be 2 nurses and the anesthesiologist, I believe. The room was buzzing with people when I walked in. There were people doing tests, there were nurses, there were multiple doctors, there was the NICU team. You can probably hear William in the background. Zach is with him, he's not alone, so don't worry. So they sat me up on the operating table, and right away they put a what do they call it, blood pressure cuff on my arm, and on the other arm they hooked up the IVs, got that all ready. They put they clipped a pulse monitor to my finger, and they put 3 ECG patches on my chest just to monitor my vitals. So right away I was hooked up to all of these things, and I was introduced to my doctors. There were multiple doctors working on me. Next up was the spinal, and this is the part I was a little nervous about. For C-section you get a spinal, for vaginal births you get an epidural. So the difference, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the difference between a spinal and an epidural is a spinal is like a one-time shot, whereas an epidural is something that like you continually get medication through. I was a little nervous about this, but I mean, I wasn't in labor. It was easy to stay still. You know, I wasn't in pain from contraction. So I believe they put like a topical numbing solution on the area first, and then they inserted the numbing medication that like the dentists use to freeze your gums, you know, that stuff. Just a small needle with a small amount of medication, just so that you don't really feel the spinal going in. Honestly, that was what hurt the most. It was just a small sting in my back, not a big deal. And then they told me to lean over. There was a nurse in front of me kind of like holding me and supporting me and just like instructing me, telling me what to do. They told me when they're gonna do the spinal, we'll want you to like push your back out as far as you can. I was just like leaning over, waiting for them to tell me to push my back out and to lean forward. And then all of a sudden she said, okay, you're done. I was like, what? I did not feel a single thing. So the spinal was so easy. Right away, I started feeling like a warm, tingly rush down my back and down my bum and my legs. And right away, it was already hard to lift my legs up. So immediately they helped me lie down on the table. They put my arms out on the side. There's like padded boards that your arms rest on. So this arm is hooked up to an IV. This arm is hooked up to the blood pressure cuff and the heart rate clip. And I'm just laying there and they're just doing their stuff. They're buzzing around me. There's bright lights in my face. It's all really blurry. Everyone was really good about telling me what they were doing as they were doing it. There was nothing that they did to me that I wasn't, you know, prepared for or expecting, because they told me as they were doing it. So next, the nurse took an ice cube and started like running it down my chest, and that's how they know whether or not you're frozen. You can still feel pressure, but you won't feel the cold. So I was numb from my chest down, and that's how it usually is. The only part of me that had feeling was my head and my arms. From there, they did an ultrasound to determine where exactly they needed to make the cut. I don't think they do this normally. In my case, I know it was a special case because there were exposed fetal blood vessels that were right around that area, and it would have been really bad had they accidentally nicked one of those. So they had to make sure they knew exactly where those blood vessels were before they sliced into me. So it was kind of cool to actually like see William on the screen in my stomach before he was in my arms. Or I guess not in my arms, in the doctor's arms technically. Next, they inserted a catheter which stays in for about 18 hours or so after the surgery. And they wrapped these like pressure stockings on my calves. And every minute or 2 minutes they would like puff up and then deflate, and then puff up and then deflate. And this helps to keep the blood flowing and prevent blood clots and the lower extremities. I actually had to wear those for like, I think it was 24 hours after surgery. So unless I was up and walking, I had these things on my legs and they were going off every couple of minutes. It was a good squeeze too. It wasn't gentle, and I had to sleep with that throughout the night. Next, they started getting me prepped for surgery. So they brought the curtain over top of me. They start rubbing a pink reddish and antiseptic solution all over the area around my bum, my legs, like a very generous amount, and they had to put that on and then wait a while just to let it dry. I vaguely remember the nurse making a joke like, it's not pink because it's a girl, it's just pink because that's the way that it is, or something like that. We didn't know the gender. We didn't know William was going to be a boy. So the nurses and the doctors are really trying to just, you know, make it a happy experience and not scary. The solution they put on my stomach is actually not supposed to be rubbed off or wiped off or anything afterwards. You're supposed to just leave it, like rinse the area when you clean it, but just leave it, don't rub it off. Even afterwards, I guess it's supposed to help prevent infection. So yes, they brought the drapes over me. There was a clear one and then a blue one, and the blue one was up the whole time, and then when he was born they dropped the blue one and then I could see him through the clear one. All of this happened in like a span of 5-10 minutes too. Like it was just a whirlwind. It was going by so quickly. It was chaotic. There were so many people in the room. I was laying there just completely helpless. I vaguely remember a nurse or someone saying, oh, the doctor's here. So my family doctor had arrived just in time. She could be present at the C-section, which is really great. She's been present for all of my births, whether vaginal or not. The anesthesiologist was on my right side by my head, and the nurse who was helping us through this whole process was on my left side by my head. And they're watching the whole process, watching what the doctors are doing. They're telling me what the doctors are doing, so I'm informed. I know what's going on. And then the anesthesiologist asked me, did you feel that? And I said, I think I felt some pressure. And she said, good, because they just did something really painful to you. Once they were satisfied that I was completely numb and ready to go, before they let Zach in, they did like an attendance report or something. It was kind of strange. I didn't expect this, but I think this happened before Zach was let in. I don't know if, I literally cannot remember if this happened after I was prepped or before I was prepped. But someone started reading off a list saying, we're here for Delilah's surgery, we're here because of vasa previa, the doctor performing the surgery is this person, and then they started calling out all of the people who are present. And as they called out the people who are present, they said, I'm here. Like an attendance report. So once everything was completely ready, then Zach was led into the room, and he sat down on the left side of my head by the nurse, and he started just making conversation with me, trying to distract me from what was going on, and the doctor started the surgery. Everyone describes the surgery as pressure, like really intense pressure. I would describe it as really strong baby kicks. That's what it felt like to me. It felt like William was just like kicking really hard. It was not long before he was born. It was like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. I remember the anesthesiologist, she was watching everything, and then she leaned in and she's like, you're gonna feel a lot of pressure now. And I could kind of see the shadows through the curtain. There was someone just like putting a lot of pressure on my stomach, you know, pushing William out. I knew this was coming. That was one thing that I knew was going to happen, is because there's no contractions to help push the baby out, they have to manually push the baby out of the hole. So there was a good amount of pressure, and then all of a sudden I heard him crying. And it was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard, and I am gonna get emotional again. So I heard his cry, and then they dropped the blue curtain, and I saw him, and he's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then Zach says, it's a boy, and I got to touch him through the plastic. I touched his hand and his head, and just marveled at how beautiful he was. Actually, when he was born, the nurse literally took my phone out of Zach's like shirt pocket and snapped a bunch of photos for us, and I am so thankful that she did that, because that's a very, very special moment that otherwise would not have been documented. I held him there for probably a minute or so, and then the NICU team took him, assessed him. Right away, the nurse led Zach around me to where the NICU team was. He was able to take pictures, take video. The nurse even took a few photos for us. So after a while, once they finished assessing him, they bundled him up. They brought him over to me. I got to touch him. I got to feel his soft skin and kiss him and smell him. At this point, I don't know what exactly would happen if he hadn't needed to be taken away. I don't know if I would have been allowed to hold him, or if Zach would have held him, or if he would have been taken to the other room with Zach while they finished stitching me up. I don't really know. But because he was born early, he needed a little bit of extra help, so they did have to take him away to the NICU. Zach went with them right away, and then I was just left there alone with the doctors as they stitched me up. I don't remember if it was during the surgery or just after the surgery, but I started feeling really nauseous, and throughout this whole time I continually felt like sharp stinging cold pains at my arm when they would inject more medication through my IV. They asked me how I was doing, and I said I was feeling a little bit dizzy, a little bit nauseous, and they said, oh, it's probably the medication we're giving you, let me just give you something else. They gave me something else through the IV. I started feeling better, everything was good. And so while I was there alone, the doctor stitching me up, the nurse and the anesthesiologist stayed with me by my head and were trying to just like make conversation with me, asking me what his name was, and just trying to distract me of everything that was going on. And it really didn't feel long before they were completely done. They had me stitched up, they removed the curtains and everything, and then they brought in, is it called a gurney? Like the rolling beds? A whole bunch of people. It was a group effort. They had to lift me off of the operating table and onto the gurney because I wasn't able to move myself. So that was kind of weird. And from there, they rolled me into the recovery room where I laid alone. It was at this point that I started to like lose it and break down. The emotion of everything kind of settled on me. Zach went back and forth between the NICU and me in the recovery room, and he sent me videos, and we sat there watching videos and seeing photos of him. So I was in the recovery room for about an hour, and during that time they'll check on me every 15 minutes. So during their checks they would do I believe they did my blood pressure, or they checked my vitals anyway, make sure everything was good. I think they took my temperature as well. And then they also did the ice test. They lifted my gown, ran an ice cube down my chest, and then I had to just like let them know when I couldn't feel it anymore. And I believe I had to be thawed until like my belly button. I also had to be able to lift my legs a little bit and wiggle my toes before they would move me back. Also, every time they checked on me, they would also press on my stomach, which is something that I was honestly a little bit surprised about. I wasn't expecting, I didn't think that would happen with a C-section, but it totally does. So with my vaginal births, they would always push on my stomach, on my uterus, and blood would gush out. They have to do that to make sure that you're not hemorrhaging, and it was really, really painful. That pushing on the stomach, super painful. But because I was numb from the spinal, it wasn't a big deal after C-section. I didn't feel anything. So they pushed on my stomach, and then they checked to see if I was bleeding, how much blood was coming out. And once they were satisfied, they left the room for 15 minutes, came back and did it all over again. In that time while I waited, I also hand expressed colostrum just into like a little cup so that Zach could take it up to the NICU so they could give it to William through his feeding tube. I mean, normally that would be when you would probably breastfeed for the first time and all of that, but I couldn't breastfeed, so I hand expressed instead. Also, while I sat there in recovery, the doctor who performed the operation, she came in, she kind of explained what happened. She told me I lost a larger amount of blood than usual. You know what? I think they also did some blood work. They took some blood from me so they could see how low I was on iron and to determine if they needed to give me an iron transfusion. And I did. I ended up having 2 iron transfusions before I went home. This is so blurry, like I hardly remember this. But I remember she came in and she just kind of said the surgery went really well, we're happy with it, and you lost a little bit more blood than usual. And then she showed me a picture of the placenta. They had taken a picture of it because it was a very special situation and kind of a rare condition, a rare case. And I remember her being like surprised at the state of it and what was going on. If you don't know my whole story, I will leave a video linked down below where I kind of explained all about that. I was diagnosed with vasa previa. Anyway, after about an hour, I was ready to be wheeled back to my room, but before they could do that, they had to give me a lovely little sponge bath, which was a very humbling experience. I mean, it's something that they do all day, every day. It's just part of their work day and they're used to it. But for me, it was a really odd experience to be completely numb, unable to move properly, and to have 2 nurses giving me a sponge bath down there. So when you go into the surgery, you're completely naked, just wearing a hospital gown. And then before they wheel you back to your room, they'll put on the gigantic pad and the mesh underwear. So after they did their little sponge bath, they put the pad and the underwear on me, and then they wheeled me back. A nurse helped me back into my bed, and I just sat there. And I waited and I waited and I waited until about 4 or 5 hours afterwards, and a nurse came in, helped me get up, helped me to walk. It was excruciating, but I was so determined to walk because I wasn't allowed in the NICU until I could walk. So once they were satisfied with that, I took my bag of pee, Zach wheeled me upstairs, and I got to see William and hold him for the first time. But the first 24 to 48 hours after surgery were probably the most painful and the most hard hours of my life. Like, I'm not gonna lie, recovery from a C-section was excruciating. I had never experienced anything like that before. I've never had a surgery. Nothing. And recovery from a vaginal birth is painful, but nothing compared to this. If I laughed, coughed, sneezed, anything hurt so bad. Holding a pillow or just putting pressure on it helped a lot. It helped feel like things were in place and like I wasn't gonna fall apart. I couldn't walk by myself. I couldn't get up. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't sit. I couldn't stand. I couldn't pee. I couldn't pull down my underwear to go to the bathroom. I couldn't sit down on the toilet or get up from the toilet without help for the first, I think it was 24 hours. It was really, really painful. And then the next morning when I woke up, I also had like muscle pain as well. It felt like I had just done like the most intense workout of my entire life. That made it hurt a lot to move side to side, to like reach, to do anything on top of the pain of the incision site. Like it was really hard, I'm not gonna lie. But from there on out, it only gets better. Every day I slowly felt a little bit better. I could slowly do a little bit more. They encourage you to get up frequently. It hurts like crazy, but get up and move, because if you don't, you're gonna be so stiff, you're gonna be so sore, it's gonna hurt that much more. So the next morning, the catheter was taken out, and afterwards I had a lot of pain that felt very similar to lightning crotch. I mentioned this to the nurse, and she mentioned something along the lines of like possible nerve damage or nerve pain. It did go away eventually, but it was really painful for a while. Also, once the catheter is out, you have to pee a certain amount in a certain time frame. I don't remember the reason for this, but they had to keep track of how much I peed. There's these special like toilet pee cups that they put on the toilet, in between the toilet and the seat, and I had to pee into it. And every time the nurse came in, I'd have to tell her, hey, I peed, and then she'd go and look at how much I peed, and it's really gross, but this is just a part of surgery. They also gave me a bag of medication, and in this bag was naproxen, Tylenol, prenatals, and a stool softener. It's something that they leave up to you to stay on top of, so I had to stay on top of like taking, I think it was naproxen every 8 hours, Tylenol every 6 hours or something like that. And this is actually the same bag of medication that they gave me after a vaginal birth. I also had quite a bit of swelling in my legs and my feet, but I honestly didn't even notice it until like 4 or 5 days after, because I was in so much pain elsewhere. It was very distracting. That's a really, really good idea of what happens before, during, and after a C-section. It has been 3 months now since I've had that surgery, and I still have pain around the incision site. This is what my incision looks like 3 months after. The center is where it's most tender. The edges, not so much, like they're pretty okay. But as you get closer to the center, it feels more numb and it feels more painful, and the pain is more widespread. The incision site is still pretty tender. My doctor says it's healing very nicely, but it's just gonna hurt a while. I mean, a surgery, it's gonna take a long time to heal. It feels really weird too, because it's numb and yet it hurts. It's a really weird sensation and it's really uncomfortable. I know I've talked to a few people who've had C-sections, and they said like you don't feel like yourself again until a year after. Like it takes a year to recover from a C-section. But that's it. That's everything for today's video. It was a lot. I will also be doing another video just kind of comparing the differences between a vaginal birth and a C-section. So if you have any questions about those, leave those in the comments and I'll try to make note of them and write them down so that I can answer those in a future video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.